Okay, take it away.
Okay, good. Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here and excited to see all of you. I'm Sheila Meyerson. I'm a member of the Sociocracy Consulting Group, and we are in for a treat today. There is a lot of knowledge and experience represented from our three panel members, and also among all the participants. I know some of the people here. So I'm looking forward to a lively exchange. Let me tell you how we are structuring this. The first half hour will have presentations, three separate presentations from the three panelists about their experience with sociocracy and in their companies. And then, so that will be for the first half hour, and then about 10 minutes of discussion among the three panelists where they get to ask questions of each other. And we did some of that when the four of us got together to plan this, and that was so lively. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then we'll have about a half hour for questions from all of you of the three panelists. So at any time, feel free to write your questions in the chat and indicate which of the three panelists you would like that question to go to. And John will be monitoring the chat and will pick the questions to ask. So John, you wanted to say something about how that will work.
Well, mostly what Sheila said. I will try and track the questions in the chat. And given that I know the panelists a little bit and the topic, I'll aim to pull out what might be maybe the most relevant or broadly useful questions as I see it. So it is a bit of a judgment call, but we're probably going to get a lot of stuff in the chat, and my job is to scan through there. Please just put your question as succinctly as you can is my request, so it'll be easier for me to track them. And that's all I need to say, I think. Go ahead, Sheila, back to you.
Okay, and do indicate which of the three panelists you'd like the question to go to. There were some questions that were asked that we posed that we said in the webinar description that the webinar would be addressing. We may or may not actually answer those questions because we wrote that early on, and a lot more questions have come up since then. So we may answer some of those questions and we may not. We'll answer other questions if we don't answer those. And if you have a question that was asked in the webinar description that we haven't addressed, feel free to ask the question again in the chat, and we're more likely to get to it that way. Okay, anything else procedural before we dive in? John, is there anything else we need to say now?
Not for me. I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Just remember to cue me who to spotlight, and I'll take care of that.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to hear from Kevin first. So John, if you would spotlight Kevin and me. And Kevin is the head of Earth Funerals. So Kevin, if you would start out by just telling us a little bit about what Earth Funerals is and what you do and the size of the company and how long you've been using Sociocracy.
Sure, thanks, Sheila. Right. Earth Funerals is an umbrella term for a suite. It's 5 separate charitable entities that we've established specifically for this project in Australia. They include operating entities, which we call trading charities, and a number of trusts and trustee entities. And the reason for all this complexity is because we want very simply to have a network of natural burial grounds across Australia, to begin with located near major capital centres. And when I say a natural burial ground, for those who aren't familiar, think about a legal place where people can be buried. So think of a cemetery, but this is a cemetery without infrastructure or absolute minimal infrastructure, car parking, facilities, no headstones, natural environment, people are buried, trees are planted, and when that area is fulfilled, it becomes a natural state park or native parkland or open green space. So the vision is a network of natural burial grounds, and then sitting beside those is a network of not-for-profit charitable funeral provision entities. So again, just think in your own experience of a funeral director or a funeral home, from the outside, identical to commercial operations, except in this sense, all run as a charity. The ultimate outcome of this is the purpose of the charitable group, which is environmental restoration. Excuse me. So while we're talking about funerals, and the thing's titled the Earth Funerals Project, that's the work it does. The organisation itself is an environmental charity, and our aim is to be funding in the first 5 years of operation, something in the vicinity of $10 to $15 million a year into environmental restoration in Australia. Now, I've been very optimistic and I've jumped ahead about 5 years, because right now where we are is at about 4 years in, massive amount of preparation, and only last week took into our care the first carbon positive cremation service and the first natural burial at a small remote site that we manage in the Victorian Highlands. So we are at as close to the beginning as you can possibly get. But for the last 3 years, we've been very busy working with Gina, who's on the call here, who's one of our founding board members, to structure from the get-go, and we have an advantage here, I think, because we're a brand new entity, to have an entity that has built into its constitution rules and policies right from the first day the principles of sociocratic governance. I became introduced to this 15 years ago. Someone threw a book at me written by John Buck and said, read this. And I did several times and kind of got excited and kind of didn't understand it and sort of thought it was cool. And time went by, and I always wondered whether there'd be some way or some use or some place to put this. And then this project grew up. So currently the project has about 6 direct employees through our funeral operations in Melbourne, part of a charitable grouping, 6 board members, about 16 or 17 strategic partners, and about 8 donors that have got us this far. What else would you like to know, Sheila?
Yeah, that's good.
That's the quick thumbnail of 4 years. We're at the cusp. We're ready to go. We do funerals. We're an environmental charity. We want to be sociocratic because this thing has to outlast me by a long way. It's got to. We think in terms of a minimum 200-year time frame, but knowing that ideally this could go on forever.
So just to translate for the people in North America, charity is what I think the same thing that we call a nonprofit. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, a registered charity in Australia would be your equivalent of it's a 501(c)(3)?
Yeah.
C3?
C3.
C3, one of those.
So tell me, say a little bit about what you hoped for in adopting Sociocracy and what benefits you're seeing for Earth Funerals.
Yeah, great question. I've had the experience of working for myself, for small organisations and for national public companies in various roles, mostly funeral, but other roles as well. So I've seen all the things that don't work, autocratic systems that might work fabulously while you've got a heroic leader, but not so great if that heroic leader falls off the wagon or leaves or changes. The principles of being in a big organisation and having everything filtered down from the top, not great. And the other thing that a personal weakness is, oftentimes I've worked in my own businesses and for myself, small businesses. So you tend to get this idea that you're the only one who can do anything. And I'm smart enough to know that that isn't the case. I'm very average, and realised that what I had to do to get this project, which is really quite ambitious, it was developed as a national program from the first conversation I ever had about this. It was visioned that way. And I realized that Sociocracy would be the perfect vehicle where I could bring together terrific people who would contribute and temper my tendency to think that I'm the only one who can do it. So there's a bit of confession in a sense. And my experience to date, we're only just beginning to trade now, but my experience to date is this works perfectly. It allows crazy thinking, safe space, throw out ideas, have them processed by the machine as I now think of it. Our board meetings would become very comfortable in that place, and to be able to bring along a proposal, throw it on the table, let go of it and go, okay, that's the group's proposal now. Let's process this thing. Let's see if it works. It's a fascinating experience. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that really come into its own as we begin to trade and expand this operation.
Mm.
I think the one key thing that hits me about it is that every single technical system, telephone system, CRM, websites, everything we do, and including all our legal structures, that always in the brief is scalability, because we've said we need to be able to run one burial ground and one funeral operation, or 50 across a country with 7 states and 7 different lots of legislation. Everything's scalable, and I know inherently that Sociocracy can scale as quickly and probably more quickly than that.
So that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, actually, is because I know you have plans to, you're growing now and have plans to grow even more rapidly. How do you see that? What advantages do you see that, of sociocratic governance for helping in rapid growth? And that's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, how will you maintain the use of sociocracy with so many new people coming in?
Right. We've got a very practical application happening real-time live right now. Obviously, to operate anywhere, we need things. We need burial grounds, which we only have one tiny sample of. We're looking to expand that. We also need funeral operations, and we've been very fortunate to be able to partner or co-mingle, or mingle as we call it in the charitable space, with an existing funeral charity based in Melbourne that's operated for 25 years, servicing or serving financially distressed families in that city, helping people with funerals who are vulnerable or in a hard place. Rather than us build another funeral premises, build another mortuary, buy more hearses, we've partnered with that charity. So we've now got a situation where we've got multiple charities. And in Australia, you don't merge charities, you can only work with them. So we use that term mingle. So what we're involved in now, and this excuse me, this mingle is becoming much closer and more intimate in a corporate sense, because the directors of that organisation were very open, and in fact have done some sociocratic training and are open to the idea that they would work in their Victorian-based operation and see the opportunity perhaps to expand their interests as well through the Earth Funerals Project nationally. So we're engaged right now in bringing on board existing staff. So implementing and retrofitting is not the right word, but useful in this sense to explain that we're now implementing sociocracy into an existing exercise, an existing operation that's been running. And this has got challenges, and it's interesting, and it's a bit difficult and very rewarding all at the once. And what we're seeing here is that work, as we're getting through it, is prototyping how we're going to operate sociocratically, so that we can then just replicate that as we expand, either organically across the country or as we're planning more actively to actually buy existing funeral businesses in other capital cities, because that's much quicker. We can simply buy a funeral business, convert that to the charitable purpose, and then use that to bring forward our sustainable funeral offerings like natural burial and carbon offset cremations. So we're getting to see how this is going to work into the future right now, and it's a bit of hard work. But quick anecdote, excuse me, we passed a policy about work distribution on the ground at this funeral operation. And the first Earth Funerals carbon offset cremation came in, and I spoke to one of the arrangers there. And because I spoke to her, I said, look, would you handle this funeral? Look after it. This is first, it's important. And she stopped me and she said, but that isn't the policy. The policy is that the work is distributed evenly amongst the group. And I went, phew, fantastic. There was a moment where I got corrected, and absolutely appropriately. And I thought, yes, this is working.
Beautiful. That's a good note to end on. I wish we had more time because I've got lots more questions I'd want to ask you, but we're going to move on and we'll hear more from you during the Q&A.
Sure.
So next in the lineup is Evan. So John, you can trade Evan and Kevin for the spotlight, and you can spotlight me in there too, if you would. So I'll ask you the same question, Evan, just to tell us a little bit about the company. Your company was Hertzler Systems. So Evan was the CEO of Hertzler Systems and retired a few years ago from it, and introduced Sociocracy while he was at the helm. So Evan, take it away.
Well, Hertzler Systems was founded in 1982. It's a software company. It does software and services. Our products are, and I'm using present tense here, are, and claiming are because I'm still on the board of directors. Our products are sold into manufacturing companies. We do data acquisition and analytics of real-time data in manufacturing companies. Customers all over North America, with some international as well. There's 15, 20 people at this point, and we've been using Sociocracy since 2014, 2015, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And so I'll ask you the same question that I asked Kevin. What did you hope for in adopting Sociocracy, and what benefits did the company see?
I really appreciated Kevin's comments here. I spent most of my career, I joined the company when there were 5 people in the company, and so I learned every job, every role in the organization, and that's a recipe for knowing too much or thinking you know too much. And as the business changes, I had to shift who I was and how I showed up in business. At one time, I thought my primary question was, how do I get stuff done? And over time, that shifted to how do we get stuff done? And that was a major transition for me, because I was used to thinking about what was my responsibility, but expand that out to the rest of the organization and really work at a shared vision organized around achieving the goals of the organization. Sociocracy came into place when I realized that I really needed to create a culture that was different, a culture that was sustainable. I loved Kevin's comments about 200 years in the future. I wasn't thinking that far out, but I was thinking about how do I create a culture that survives me, that I can leave to, that I can leave the business and do some other things in my life. And so it became a question of sustainability. How could I create a culture that was sustainable without me, that really engaged people in ways deeper and more wholly, H-O-L-Y maybe, not just W-H-O-L-Y, in the operation of, in the performance and the operation of the organization.
So that's what you hoped for, and it sounds like that's what in fact what you saw.
Yeah, I'm just proud of what we've accomplished, and I think the impact that I witnessed in the organization, the kind of growth in profitability and in financial success is huge. There were several benefits that we saw. One is that we were able to make decisions far faster. There were more meetings, and there's some kind of pushback against more meetings, but it turns out that those meetings were really productive in advancing the company forward. And the consent process really enabled us to take baby steps that moved the company forward very quickly and made sometimes really incredible decisions that were very clear and beneficial to us. We also saw these meetings were very efficient, and what we really saw was this increase in employee engagement and in strategic thinking. I used to think that it was my job to come up with all the strategic plans and figure out how we're going to solve these problems, and it was just completely exhausting to think that I carried the world on my shoulders. And I finally woke up and said, wait, there's a lot of smart people here. And how do I cut them loose, tap into their expertise, and bring this really to the forefront? And we now have people that are really actively engaged and are thinking very strategically. Along with that, we have a huge increase in a really strong benefit in employee retention. We had this great resignation in the world. We've all been reading about it. And Hertzler has had zero turnover since the pandemic started, which is just, I find that just kind of jaw-dropping. It's also been much easier to recruit new people when they hear about our work culture and the chance to engage and participate in decisions that matter and that impact your job and your ability to perform. That's a really attractive draw for employees. The other thing that I think has really been fun, we do not expect our clients to use Sociocracy, but we have subtly developed a process for deployments with our customers that uses the consent process. It's a really cool, just before I retired, I had an employee who was working with a client, and I said, so you're now a trained and skilled facilitator in our company. And this is a woman who was a technician doing implementations at client sites. And she was complaining that she couldn't get the clients together to work. And I said, look, you're a trained facilitator, you know how to do a circle process. Why don't you take this process that we use for making decisions in our circle and take it to the clients and say, I want everybody in the room who's going to be impacted by this. And our products are impacted throughout the manufacturing company. There are people in engineering, quality, finance, production planning, production engineering, all these departments who never talk to each other. And we insist now that when we do a planning session with them, that they all come together and we do a circle process to make sure we're hearing from everybody in the business. And it creates so much ownership and enthusiasm for what we're rolling out and deploying. And we have an 88% close rate now on proposals that come out of that process because people are engaged and they own it. So this process we found not just worked for our company, but it actually created a whole new line of business for us, really, or a whole new way of doing a line of business that was floundering before that.
Wow, that's wonderful to hear about. Would you say a little bit more about what was required of you as a leader for the Sociocratic Circle organization method to succeed?
Well, I had trained my staff to my way of working, and so I had to untrain them. I literally, with one of the groups, I literally would, I was a member of the circle, but I said, I am not going to facilitate, I'm not going to record, and I'm going to sit in the back of the circle so that you can't see me. Because people would surreptitiously look out the corner of their eye to see how I was going to react to something and try and second guess me and make sure that they got on my right side. You know, it was a problem. And I had to really learn to adopt a poker face and sit on my hands and make sure that everybody actually spoke and that we all heard each other before I spoke. I had to stop being the first one to speak and the loudest voice in the room. And that was humbling, Kevin said confessions. This is my confession. I had to learn some things the hard way. And the hardest thing, people to trust me that this change was real and that their voice really would be heard. And it was, I had to be consistent. And, I had Kevin describe this kind of waking up. Yeah, you busted. That happened more than once. I got called out and learned.
Okay, thank you again. I've got lots more questions, and we're going to move on to the next person. Thank you,
All right.
Evan. So next will be Richard Heitfield, who was the CEO for many years of Creative Urethanes, which is a plastics manufacturing company in Virginia in the United States. That was one of the first companies to adopt the Sociocratic circle organization method in the United States. So Richard, if you would start out telling us just a little bit about what the company does and the size of the company and how long you use Sociocracy for.
Thank you, Sheila, and thank you, everybody. Well, I'm retired. I started the business of Creative Urethanes in 1970, and we ran for about 40 years, I guess, total, and it's since been acquired. So I had the fortune or privilege, I guess, of serving in the U.S. Navy before I got into the business, and I saw the decision-making process from the enlisted perspective and the commissioned officer perspective, just because of the program and the career path that I followed. So I had noticed that in the military that there was a lot of expertise and initiative at the enlisted rank that the officer rank didn't really listen to. So I kind of saw it from both sides. So when I got into business in manufacturing, Creative Urethanes was a manufacturing company. When we implemented Sociocracy, we had about 70 people. We were custom molders, so we molded, basically had machinery in a factory, used raw materials and molds, and made parts for custom applications. One of the big lines then was skateboard wheels. Guys like Tony Hawk used our stuff. We were the kind of one of the preeminent skateboard wheel manufacturers back in those days. We made urethane pipe systems. We did a lot of industrial products for different pieces of machinery that you wouldn't recognize as a consumer. And basically what happened was that the process itself involved many different materials, many different types of machinery, lots of different techniques for molding, and it was kind of a big, it was a real big mixture of different ways to produce the same kind of products. So with those two thoughts in mind, with those two situations, I set out to find a system that I thought might help tap into the expertise of the people that were working with these systems every day, and also kind of corral and tame this myriad of different processes. So I met John Buck through my wife, who was a therapist, and John Buck sent me a couple of Xerox pages of actually every other page of a book he was working with Gerard on at the time, Gerard Edinburgh. And so after that, I met with John Buck. He came to me to visit with me, and then he set up a system with Gerard Edinburgh to come to the States for training. And I signed up for training, and Gerard and we both stayed at my house when they visited here in Virginia. So I got to know them really well, spent some time in Holland with them, and went to they have lots of different companies, not speaking English, but anyway, I went to lots of different meetings, Sociocratic meetings over there. So I kind of got an idea how it worked. And I trained a couple of people that worked for me, and in the Sociocratic system, Gerard, we all went to Gerard's training here in Virginia. And then we set about implementing Sociocracy on our own. So we spent probably 3 or 4 months trying to figure out what a policy was, and gave up on that. And then we continued to implement different parts of the system on our own. And looking back on it, I think probably it would have been a lot better to have brought in outside expertise. I was a little bit like, I guess a little bit like Kevin. I was pretty much in everybody's face. I was involved with all levels of the operation. Very much of a micromanager, and was looking for that expertise in people that I knew I had to come forth. So we implemented the system our own way, fits and starts. And one of our biggest projects initially was I think Gerard calls it the 27 block diagram. It's an input, transformation, output, horizontal axis, do, lead, and measure on the vertical axis. And basically, I guess it's cybernetic. It's analysis on how your processes work. And I tend to go into detail, so I'll hold back on that. But we basically use the Sociocratic process with consent decision making in the circle structure we developed to put this system together. It's 27 block diagram, and it was pretty magnificent. All the systems that seemed to be totally or somewhat out of control got dialed in. All the common systems were pulled together through this process, and we became very efficient manufacturing wise. And the people that were actually doing the work participated. Even noticed some difficult type employees that had a lot of expertise that were always finding things that you did wrong, kind of turned around and transformed into real leaders in the organization. So overall, it was a really incredible transformation and process for us. And I stopped micromanaging. I learned the lessons also. I did sit in on some meetings. I started running all the meetings myself, and I figured that out pretty quick. Wasn't a good idea. So then I backed out and sat in the back, and then I finally stopped going, and it went well. The people, through their own processes, determined how often they wanted to meet and what their policies were. And there was, still double link to the general circle, but I pretty much focused my effort on the general and top circle at that point, and the rest of it ran well. It was all double linked, so it worked pretty well. So anyway, we implemented in the late 80s, and I sold the business. It was a C corporation, Virginia C corporation. Sold it in 2018 to a friendly competitor up in Rhode Island. And many of the parts of the system were in place during that acquisition. And my friend who bought the business kept most of that in place and actually modified some of his processes, mostly on the financial side and the process side. I didn't put a big label on it called Sociocracy. It was I presented it as the way we were operating. So that was my end of the role there. But I'm still interested in the system. Still, I just visited Gerard a couple of years ago, and on a week, and still see John Buck often. So I'm a real believer in the system, and I'm doing what I can to help facilitate and move it forward into the world.
So I had a question about that, which I know a lot of people are curious about, that of how did using Sociocratic governance affect the sales process, if at all, when you sold it?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really attracted this friend of mine was that he was in a similar business, and we had dialed the processes down so tightly with this system, with this 27 block approach, that I think, and then in manufacturing world, we had taken that system and leaned it. It was called lean manufacturing, and it was a really spectacular production system for that niche of product that he was really interested in. So I think that was a big part of it. Some of the other parts that really were interesting to him were the profit sharing, the way we set that up, and we had actually started for the ownership part of it, the Sociocratic system. We had set up an ESOP, and I had a real difficult time. We're in Virginia, near West Virginia, so a lot of our folks were West Virginia based out in the rural areas, and trying to explain to them why the value of the stock was going up and down. Just I wasn't successful at that. Someone else probably could have done it, but So we backed off the ESOP and put a profit sharing in place. But
Richard, let me just translate that for people's business, for people's benefit. ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan.
that affected the saleability with this of the business with the acquirer, the guy.
Okay, well, thank you. At this point, we get to have a discussion among all the panelists. So John, if you would bring the other two back into the spotlight, and if each of you would ask a question of one other person. Evan, you've got a smile on your face like you're ready to start. You're mute.
I'm really interested in this thing, this interface between a sociocratic organization and non-sociocratic organization. And Kevin, I'm not sure I understood the way you're doing that, because it sounds like you've got kind of a mixture of both. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts to share on how that works, the perils of it and the benefits of it.
I've certainly got some thoughts on how it is developing and how I hope it'll work, because it's very much a current place exercise. The funeral operations, the funeral home, for want of a simpler term, that exists in Melbourne has existed for 25 years, 15 years in its current location, and it was started by a family as a charity to help people, and the immediate members of that family have predominantly been board members and managers at various times over those years. So it's naturally grew out of a heroic leader kind of model. There was a champion of this, a lovely guy called Ted Worthington. And he founded this, and it was that typical kind of top-down exercise, which has worked and succeeded in its role as a charity for many years, but not without its issues or not without difficulties in terms of coordination, organisation. So when we came to originally speak, what we said from the Earth Funerals project, we said, look, we want to market sustainable funerals, and obviously we need hearses and coolrooms and fridges. Can we just buy services from you? Can we borrow? You become our contract fulfillment agent. And that was the beginning point. But as we came along, we realized there was so much value alignment in terms of our social values and our environmental values that we could work much more closely together. And as the main operator there became more and more familiar with what we were doing, he was enamored of the idea of sociocracy, trained, and realized that if we were going to be working together in the future, it'd be much better if we could work sociocratically. So one of the people on this call, Erin Young, is a member of TSCG. She's for the last several months and for the next several months is working directly with the team on the ground in Oakley to implement sociocracy, to implement training. 2 of the 4 people have been trained so far, 2 more coming up soon, implementing a general circle, a circle of all members, and we're right in the midst of establishing sub-circles, more specific circles around particular roles. So this is all current right at this moment, and with the full support and active support of the original bereavement assistance team. And more now, I think the buy-in of the existing staff there, who quite rightly, all change is scary and a bit skeptical, and we turn up and we kind of go, we're going to do this, and you see that look that goes, oh yeah, we've heard this before. But we keep turning up and we keep turning up, and we've got just terrific, we're very fortunate. Let me acknowledge that, very fortunate here to have probably the two of the most skilled people in Australia working directly with us. Gina Price on our board, as noted in the chat, and Erin, who's been with TSCG for many years, who was simply seeking a different role for a while. And I think the opportunity to see her bring so much training and put it into the real world is both exciting, looking at Erin's input and the results on the ground. Does that get you, Evan? Does that touch the question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. So it really sounds like it's divide and conquer, or you win them over. That's what I'm hearing.
I was interested in the commonality and personalities between Richard, yourself, and me, which is that tendency to fall into micromanager or think you've got to solve all the problems. Clearly, I can't tell you how heartening that is to know that what I'm trying to do, and I've physically distanced myself. I was living in Melbourne and now moved back to Adelaide, which is home. So I'm 900 Ks away, which makes it a bit easier for me not to fiddle. But I'm also listening very carefully to me in the near future, not being the first voice that speaks in these meetings, which is typically how it's been at present. So I thank you both for that already. I said at the beginning I was curious and I would learn something today, and it's going on. I've got a page full of notes already.
Yeah, and there'll be a recording, and we'll all have access to the recording afterwards too. Richard, do you have a question you'd like to ask either of the others? You're mute.
Well, I think for Evan, I think we talked a while ago before as you were thinking about making the decision to go forward with this, and I didn't realize that the micromanaging part was part of your process too. I was just wondering, when you sat in the back of the meetings, did you do that? Like, did you keep doing that, or did you, after a while, did you drop out of that? I mean, I know sitting in the back would get you out of the main view, because I had to get out of the room totally. Just wondering.
Yeah, there was clearly there were things that I had to just get out of completely. But eventually my team learned the power of their own voice, and they became much more comfortable just saying, "Oh, just hold on a second. You said you were gonna. This is our decision. Just we have a voice here." So yeah, it eventually I was able to reincorporate back in the group, and I was just one of the group. In some ways, what I found was that that power in organizations actually multiplies. You know, I think there's some fear among leaders, and I think I had some of this, is that if I'm giving away power, I'm losing power. But in fact, the more I gave away, the more I had, and the more everybody had, and the more power there was in the whole organization. And that was just really exciting to see that. I was no longer the bottleneck that took everything down. You know.
Thank you.
That's great, Evan. I've never heard somebody describe it exactly that way. That's wonderful. Kevin, do you have a question you'd like to ask one of the others?
Sheila, I have tyranny of choice. I have a page of questions that I want to ask both of these guys, but I'll Evan, possibly just to start with you. You interestingly used the term sustainability when you were talking about some of the outcomes. Clearly, very an interesting subject for us. One of our entities is called Sustainable Funerals Australia, and that's discussed as the option. How sustainable, like post your departure as the CEO, has the structures remained consistent? Obviously, they'll be changing and evolving, but how has that gone in terms of its sustainability? You wanted that. Has that occurred?
Yeah, I checked with my former partner, who's now the CEO. I just touched base with him before the start of this, when we were talking about planning for this. The structures are evolving. It's working exactly the way it's supposed to. They just created a new department and a whole new area of stuff, and they reorganized a bunch of circles around that, and it's happening organically. It's not. I'm quite confident that there's nobody at the top pushing dials. This is evolving organically by the people who are doing it, saying, well, if we're doing that, we probably ought to do this. This is what's going to make sense, that's the strategic thinking that's going on. So what's happening, I was able to retire, leave the company. I'm on the board. I meet with them, for 2 or 3 hours once a quarter. The company is doing fantastic. The system is in place and working. It really my partner and I talked about I was what, 5 or 10 years older than him, and I said, I'm not going to do this when I'm 85 years old. I want to be looking at an exit strategy at some point. And he was like, no, we can't do that. But once we got this system in place, at some point he came to me and said, I think I could do this. And that's the point where I said, fine, I'm ready to retire. Let's figure out how to make the transition. It was a 2-year process after that, but it really worked very well.
Right.
That's interesting. I wanted to check something with Richard. Evan talked about the turnover was essentially 0 at the company, and I think you have reported pretty much the same thing at Creative Urethanes. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we had a core group that just stayed with us through thick and thin. What they did now and then was when they reached certain points in their lives, they may have liked to go part-time. I mean, it was really quite interesting to watch these guys. They figured out how to keep it staffed, with different expertise for different product lines. So yeah, it was, everybody stayed around in one form or another, all the way through, everybody.
So we're going to be moving pretty soon into questions from the participants in the webinar. So if you would write your questions in the chat and indicate who you would like to ask the question of. And until John, you say the word when you've got a question ready. And in the meantime, we can keep having a discussion among the panelists.
I've got a couple actually that were sent direct to me, so everybody's not seeing them, but there's a couple we can already go to if we're ready for that.
Sure.
Okay. So, and these are good questions. For Richard, how did the sociocracy impact your HR practices in a company the size of yours?
That's a good question. I actually, one of the first people that I took to send to the training with Gerard was the HR director, and she really took the system to heart. So she was very instrumental in setting up meetings and kind of keeping me in check from being too micromanagement type oriented about it. So I think she probably was one of the key people who really led us to successful implementation, especially in the early days. Is that an answer? Is that a good answer?
Yeah, this is from Steve. Steve, is that good? Did you have any quick follow-up? I can't see you if you're out there, Steve, so you might need to unmute.
All right. Yeah. So, this is Steve Keener. So we have 400 employees in our organization, and so we have personnel matters going on all the time. And I just wondered how sociocracy affected the way you handled people not following policies or people not being good team players, and sometimes having to ask them to leave the company. Did sociocracy impact how you did that?
Actually, yeah, I guess it did. It wasn't necessarily an HR perspective, I don't think, but more of a process in the manufacturing part. When there were problems with the way things were operated, it wasn't necessarily directed at individuals, but it could have been involved. It was worked through with the consent decision making. So basically, if it was a policy issue, that's where they resolved it. If it was more of an operational issue, then that was back to the authoritarian structure, really the leadership in place, the production management folks would take care of that. And I don't know that it changed the way they did that, but it was clear when there was action taken, what it was based on, just because of the way the policies and the authoritarian systems were set up. I don't think the policies in the HR area changed more along the benefit with the 401k and the profit sharing, and that we had a bonus we put in place for attendance, those type of things. That was more the impact of the policies at HR. But in terms of the authoritarian part of it, I think I don't remember a lot of problems early on with the authoritarian part with production guys being a big problem, but that's the way that the clarity, I think, in the structure and the process has made it easier to kind of make it clear what was not happening correctly.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. Good question. Here's another one from Vanda is asking, she's not asking anyone particular, but if you have I think this would be for Richard based on the question. Can you say more about how use of, excuse me, can you say more about how use of sociocracy sped up production processes? I guess more specifically. That's what she's asking. I think that's for you, Richard, since you're the main production process guy.
Yeah, that was well, basically, when you go through processes in manufacturing, there's lots of different techniques for optimizing what you're trying to do. So what we had was different types of molds, different types of machinery, different material processes, all mixed together in a work center arrangement. And the idea was that we could, as we were a custom business, so the loading changed a lot from one area to another, season to season. The overall output of the business wouldn't change that much, but what we had to do inside to make that happen changed a lot. So basically, the processes were, when we went through the analysis, the input process output analysis, that was done at a macro level. So basically, you get raw materials in, you prep the raw materials, you prep the equipment, you prep the molds, and then you put those in your process, and your output is products you send to individual companies or individuals. So we shredded that down with that. It's a fractal. So basically, once you get the input transformation output put together, each one of those blocks can be broken down further into the same three replicated blocks. So you could dial down, if you have three different types of processes, or which we basically had, and several different types of molds, and some, spin casting, vacuum casting, lots of different processes within that configuration. Each one of those had its own process, its own process sheets. So was that the answer? Or yeah, I'm sorry, I got down to the details. Is that an answer to the question, or do you want me to go deeper?
Not really. I was thinking about, well, what about Sociocracy helped with your process of doing all those things?
Well, we used the process itself when we implemented the system to develop those processes, the input, transformation, output, the 27 block diagram. So basically, the idea of setting up the consent decision making and the circle process allowed us to get to that, to clarify the way that those systems would work best.
Okay.
So we ended up actually, when we dialed it down further, we were doing ISO 9001, I think it was, quality system. That became the measurement block. So we took a macro approach and used the consent process to, I mean, we're talking about meetings where we sit down and we talk about, it's like a football coach in the locker room. How are you going to do this? Like, what are your rules going to be? How are you going to set this up? How are you going to handle these different processes? And that the sociocratic system itself, and that specific part of it, that 27 block approach, gave us the tools to do that. We had tried to do that many times before and had arguments, and then I made the final decision. And a lot of times, I mean, I'm an engineer, but there's stuff that people that work with things like that every day know a whole lot better than I did as a manager and engineer. So that's where it tied in.
So you invented what I think we call standard operating procedures or systems.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Which you did by including everybody who had an axe to grind in the outcome or any understanding of what might go wrong, or what would make it better, or how the customer would be happy, or whatever it all was. So that might also include sort of follow up and, just checking the quality stuff or the customer satisfaction or other stuff as well that you would have as a standard thing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And then, and then the ISO, the time with the ISO system led us to customer questionnaires, follow-ups and surveys later. And those also led to another input back into the process. So the system became self-correcting at that point.
So that's your continual improvement part of it.
Yeah. Improvement, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
If
welcome.
I could I'd like to just interject a comment here for those of you who are not familiar with the 27 block chart, because I know a lot of people are not. In the book We the People by John Buck and Sharon Vallines, there's a whole chapter about that. And the second edition of the book, it's much expanded from the first edition of the book. So that will give you a basic introduction to what they're talking about. It's actually fundamental to the Sociocratic Circle organization method, and a lot of people have never heard of it. Got another question ready, John? Do you want to?
Yeah.
How's that for a quick and dirty explanation, Richard? Do you want to add anything to what I said?
Yeah. Okay.
That's good. Yeah, that's exactly that's it. I guess the 27 block was my holy grail. I love that system.
Yeah. Okay, and we've actually got another question about that for Richard, but I'm going to go back. There's one for Evan for a minute, so just to spread the love a little bit here. Question for Evan. Hang on, I got to back up. This is a good one too. Evan, were there any policy so once you got things rolling, I think this means, once you were letting go and sitting in the back of the room or whatever, were there any policy decisions that you didn't object to that you wished you had?
That's a great question. No, I don't think so. I mean, nothing comes to mind. And, this has been a couple of years. So it's, if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I might have had a different answer. But I felt like I could be a full participant. I think that's part of this power sharing thing, is that I really could voice whatever I had to say as well. I was a full member of the circle, of any circle I was a part of, and I could voice. And we could have our arguments, we could have the conflict, we could get stuff out on the table. And my role, my title didn't matter. I was just one voice. And whatever, so it was a way that truth could be said and determined. And these are complex problems, complex things, and sometimes you don't know. And I think so often we made baby steps. And I think that was one of the really beautiful things about this model, is that the consent, you might come in with this proposal that was going to reshape some whole area, and people would freak out, and you'd say, okay, well, it's the need for this still stands. What's the smallest baby step we can take? And you'd come with that. And then the next baby step would be 3 weeks later, and you just keep making baby steps. And all of a sudden we went from being paralyzed about making this big decision to making a bunch of little ones and getting faster, further than we ever could otherwise. I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Is that good? That was Steve Keener again. Steve, is that helpful?
Steve!
He's working you, Evan.
He's
Sorry,
working
I know
you.
it's not fair. I talked to him plenty, so I could just ask my questions then, but good answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing them here, because we got a bunch of other people who get to hear that. And I guess I'll make one tag on, Evan, if you could say this is correct or not. But in terms of Steve's question, there might have been something that you did object to, but again, at that point, you weren't objecting as the boss. You would be objecting as a member of the team, and it would be processed by the circle in that way that we do, right? Is that's what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And it also, I mean, there was also, I mean, we really liked the, I don't like this much, but I don't object to it. I would rather have the blue one than the red one, but Okay, that's personal opinion. I recognize that. So degrees of preference, yeah, all that came to bear.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you, Evan. So let me go back to, there's one for Richard here. And again, folks, feel free. We have some time remaining after this, so feel free to put in some more questions.
And
so
a
this is-
reminder to reminder to include who you're asking the question of.
Yeah, so this is for Richard, and this is actually from Gina. I really appreciate this question. And Gina says, Richard, you are the first person I have heard to sing in praise of the 27 block chart. I have tried to implement it in applications where it may be seen as overkill. Can you comment on where or when the 27 block chart may be most valuable and where it might be overkill?
Well, that's a really good question. I have done like the 9-block approach, like the block approach on stuff not related to my business. So not in great detail, it's more of a thumbnail sketch. But I think what I was dealing with when I was so drawn to this was, I mean, I had scraps of paper, I had SOPs here, I had codes on molds. It was a very complex process, and it needed a complex reining in. In order to get that system under control, you needed to address all those details. And this thing, this fractal approach, you can take it down as many levels as you need to. We had systems where you'd have a material that had to be within certain temperature ranges and certain ratios and flow rates, and a mold that had to be tilted in three-dimensional space at a certain angle, and a certain amount of blow by venting, and there was a lot of stuff that if you did it, even if you did it, there was only about a 90% shot that you would light off the machine, set it up, and get a good first part, because there was some variability in the raw materials part of it. So, but if you didn't do that, you could spend shifts chasing the thing down just with some variable that if you had remembered it from the last time, or you had it documented in the way you could find it, you could have cut that down to size. So it is overwhelming. And I tend to not go to details. I'm more of a big picture person, but in this particular case, I got down in the nitty gritty of this stuff and brought everybody with me. It was all production guys. There were some material guys there, but it was most of the guys that run with it every day. And I had the chemist, everybody that was pertinent to it. I believe we set up it was a subcircle for that. They crossed boundaries because we didn't want to have to go from one to the other to do it. But yeah, it's overwhelming, but everybody that I was working with knew that we needed to do that. There was no objection to that level, and we spent some time on it. So it's something you probably wouldn't want to use with your family to decide where to go to lunch, but you can back it up to that level of simplicity if you just back off the number of fractals you use. So, but in that particular case, it was what was needed, and it worked well. Is that an answer? Is that a good answer?
Right. And if I can paraphrase Richard, I think I hear you saying it's matching the complexity of the approach to the complexity of the problem. And that's what worked for you. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, if I could add to the deeply into my question, because I guess it's easy to see how you could have got a lot of mileage out of it, Richard. But what about for simple things? You say you use the 9-block. I actually use the 27-block chart to design a system for dealing with mail coming to our house. I put myself in the 27-block chart deep category, but it really brought some elements of thinking into a very simple system that were profound. So I'm a big fan of it, but I've sort of backed off trying to work on it with clients, thinking maybe it's just for a certain geek mind. But I guess that was where I was coming from. But I think your answer is, and your belief is enough to make me think, I think I'm going to not hold back on it perhaps so much as I have. So thank you.
John, before you go on to another question, I think Evan had, I'm sorry, not Evan, Kevin, did you have your hand up?
We got it. So we've got, I'm just adding myself to the spotlight since I'm kind of co-facilitating the questions now. Yeah, Vernon, I see your question and that'll be next. And Kevin had something he wanted to follow up with Evan, I believe. So Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. Both Richard and Evan had spoken about the efficiency of sociocracy. Evan, you spoke about making quicker decisions, moving forward faster, changing the company quicker. Our experience at our early stage is that we get a bit of pushback that this is sort of complicated and slow and a bit clunky. And I have a sense, having worked with our board for a number of years, it does become more efficient. But in your experience particularly, how long did you think it take, or what level of expertise did your staff need before that obvious acceleration where you could make quality decisions quicker than the autocratic methods?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can give you a time frame. And I think it's also I think that sense, the realization that we could move faster kind of snuck up on us, because we would, you know, so there was I think a legitimate complaint that, gosh, it seems like we're having meetings. Another meeting, oh gosh, another meeting. And I, you know, that's a realistic thing. That from my perspective, the benefit of that was the speed of decisions and the quality of decisions and the scope of the decisions, because we would do these baby steps, but sometimes we would do these decisions which were just seemed like earth-shaking things, and they were just obvious, and we just did them, and everybody was on board. And that's hard to quantify, or hard to see, and keep in mind that a couple of years ago we would have agonized on this for 9 months or a year or 2 years and never done anything, you know. And so yeah, I think to get everybody in the room and talk takes time, and it you know, if your fundamental framework is I got my job to do and this other stuff is distracting from it, then another meeting is the problem. But if you realize, no, actually we got to get everybody's head on this so that we can get the best possible solution, that it changes the nature of things. But there's a constant, it's a constant tension, constant push-pull. I don't know, does that answer your question, Kevin? Not really, but...
Yeah, you know, no, it does. It's insightful, obviously, because you're looking backwards at something we're looking forward at. So those perspectives are really useful.
But what it means is that you might want to be working at managing expectations.
Yes. I mentioned that I read John Buck's book a number of times before I ever actually sat in a practical training course, which was scenario based. And I got an aha moment. I kind of went, oh, this is an experiential thing. This is like eating chocolate. You know, you can tell someone what chocolate tastes like forever until you actually go, oh, there it is, that Belgian dark chocolate. Is that what you're saying, Evan, that it's more a thing that is experiential when you keep showing up, get the group together, that emerges?
Yeah, I think Vernon's question was around, maybe jump to that, John. What the Vernon's question is about, how do we get started?
Well, yeah. So if you're okay to segue, Kevin and Evan, I think it may be.
I think we'll sort of answer that.
Yeah. So Vernon asked, you know, and one person, which was Richard, said, you know, he read the book, and then you did, of course, have some consultation with John Buck and Gerard, but you also implemented Sociocracy somewhat in your own space. For the other two, what training did your company have, and what helped the most to implement successfully? So for Kevin and Evan.
Kevin, you want first, or shall I?
No,
Let me,
go ahead.
Since you're looking more back at it, Evan, how about you talk about this training and support that you...
Yeah, so I got enthusiastic when I read Lillo's book, Reinventing Organizations, and I thought, this is going where I want to go with the company. This is the picture of how organizations of the future going to look? I want to be in on this. And I got all excited about holacracy in the book and thought, oh, this is so cool. And I took it to my leadership team at the time, and they said, have you gone off the deep edge? You have gone, forget it. There's no way. And I thought, okay, that's so much for trying to sell that one down there, ram that one down their throats. And then I went back to the book and I kept running into the word sociocracy. And I thought, what the heck is that? And I Googled, and John, this group, Sociocracy Consulting Group, showed up someplace. And somehow I ended up on the phone with John Schinner. And John and I talked, and he gave me Richard's name. I talked to him, and then I realized there was a 6-week or 9-week fundamentals class coming up online, starting 2 days away, and I signed up for it. And out of that class, I came back to a proposal. At the end of that class, I came back to my leadership group, and with kind of fear and trembling, and with never having done beyond the class, led a circle process, and thinking they would go, oh, here he goes again with another crazy idea. Led them on a consent process to send 2 more people to the class, and they consented. And then we had to find a class, and we couldn't get a class going. And so I ended up recruiting several people from my community in organizations that I was aware of in Northern Indiana here, and invited John to come and teach a class for 3 days, I think, in Goshen, Indiana, with a bunch of organizations, because we couldn't fill a class ourselves. We'd shut the whole company down to do that. So we took, 5, 6, 8 people through that class, that first class. And that was foundational to establish the basic understanding and really embedded in the organization. And we really committed to bringing everybody that came through the company into the company as we were growing and experiencing turnover. Before we stopped having so much turnover, we took them into that class in some form or other. And so they all got foundations, and we made sure a bunch of people also got a training in facilitation, so that we really could cultivate facilitation skills across the organization. And that training was essential. I would not recommend doing this. I don't know how, Richard, my hat's off to you that you made that happen in your company, but it just changed it really established, grounded this whole thing in, as this is the new way we're operating, and we're really committed to this. And here's your chance to come up to speed with it and get on board. And people ate it up. They jumped on.
Right. And you also had, because I was the main consultant, you also had follow-up support in various ways. You had that, right. You had a community of practice within your company with.
Yeah, we included some people outside of our company as well, that we did monthly calls with John, where we'd come in and John would facilitate on a Zoom call before Zoom was Zoom. And we brought our questions, and John would have some teachable moment on something. And that was a great, this is my plug for you, John. For the group, for the whole group. But it really was helpful to have that kind of modeling and discipline and exposure over time. That was, I don't know, we did the community practice for a couple of years at least, kind of on a monthly basis.
Yeah. And part of my, and we need to, let me get to Kevin, and Sheila wants to move on to the wrapping this up. But I want to say a key part of my job in supporting that community of practice within Hertzler was, as Evan figured out, handing, I was there and I could give some specific expertise, but mostly my job was to hand it back to that group and say, okay, well, what do you come up with for this situation you're in? Here's some thoughts, and what do you think you need to do? And that was the key. And they got brilliant at it. So thank you, Evan. Kevin, do you have a few quick words about your training and support to date that will help to answer that question?
I've just had one of those aha moments, John, because I now feel more confident because I realize I'm standing on you guys' shoulders. What Evan's described, I think we're in it's like if that was ver 1, we're in ver 4 of that. with the recent establishment of a sociocratic implementation working circle at the most general level to oversee the implementation of sociocracy, particularly on the ground in our Melbourne operation. And it's exactly as Evan's saying. I mean, our plan is to have everyone trained through online courses, and to be living and doing this on a daily basis. We're running weekly operations meetings and 3 weekly policy meetings where this is being bedded in, and I've been reasonably confident, very confident of that, but even more so now, because whereas we're not treading new ground, we're just following maybe a slightly cleared path. You guys were out there with machetes a little bit before us, for which I am grateful. Thank you.
I might add one
ahead.
other thing that we sometimes do when we're supporting the implementation in a company is to actually coach the circle meeting. So be there during the meeting. I don't know. I think you probably did some of that, John. I'm not sure, but that's it's not instead of any of the others. It's in addition.
Yeah, and so thank you, Kevin. Vernon, is that good for now? Enough of an answer?
That's good enough. Just Evan, I lived in Columbus, Indiana for a while, and Richard, I'm from Bluefield, West Virginia, so I have a sense of the people in Blue. And I'm surprised you got Sociocracy to work in West Virginia. and Virginia. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vernon. Okay, thank you, everyone. That's pretty much time that we have for questions, and it so happens we don't have any other burning questions in the chat right now. So Sheila, back to you. We'll start wrapping this up.
Yeah, and I think you can probably turn off the spotlight for this. If there's some reason to leave it on.
It's going to take us out.
And John, if you would put the text in the chat, I want to
Yeah, go ahead. I will be doing that.
I want to give everybody some information about how you can learn more about Sociocracy. So there is a link that John will put into the chat momentarily, rather than trying to put everything in the chat or use a slide which you can't click on. I've set up a Google Doc, and John is going to put that link in the in what John just put up is a link to it. So that has all the information, and I will send this out in an email once the recording is posted. We will send everybody who's on this, who registered for this, an email with the link to the recording, and it will also have the link to that Google Doc as well. I wanted to specifically mention a few things. That Google Doc has contact information for the 3 panel members if you want to contact any of them. They've all agreed to be contacted. And I wanted to highlight the dates of our next, since people have been talking about our courses, I wanted to highlight the dates of the next ones. So there's our next introductory webinar, which is an hour and a half, will be on June 7th in the US, June 8th in Australia. And that's Gina Price and Francine Prukenza will be doing that. And then the next foundations course, which is a 6-week course, begins July 24th in the US, 25th in Australia, and it's those same 2 people who will be teaching that. And then once you've had the foundations course, you have that meets the prerequisite for the facilitation course. And the next facilitation course, which is also 6 weeks, begins October 23rd or 24th in Australia. And I will be teaching that with Francine. Are you and I teaching that one together? I have to remember. Okay. Francine's busy teaching courses. So we look forward to seeing some of you in that, in either or both of those courses. If you have a group that would like training at a different time, because depending on what part of the world you're in or what your workday looks like, those times might not be convenient, please contact us. We can talk about setting up a course for your group, or as we already heard of, you might pull in people from several organizations together. There will also be a link in there for something that we call your meeting coach. If you would like somebody to facilitate a meeting for you, so you get a taste of what this is like, whether you're already using it or not. It's just always interesting to see somebody else do it. We can facilitate a meeting, or we can coach the facilitator and the whole group in how to have more effective meetings. So that link will be in that Google Doc. And then there's something else that I anyway am very excited about that's brand new. We're looking to start a monthly CEO roundtable for leaders of organizations that are implementing or have implemented sociocracy. So if that might be of interest to you, please send me an email, and most of you have gotten an email already from me for this webinar, so you have my email address, but that will be in that Google Doc as well. And I've already talked to Richard and to Evan about coming occasionally as a resource person for that roundtable. So that we envision that being monthly, and we have yet to work out any of the details, but right now I'm wanting to assess the interest. So would love to hear from you if that's something you're interested in. Okay. Let's see, we have just a few minutes left. So if each of the panelists could say like about 1 or 2 sentences of any final words from you. And if everything you have to say has already been said, that's okay too.
Yeah, and Sheila, there was one question I missed, which came in during Kevin's interview, and I've just requested him to respond to that in the chat. So watch the chat for something from him, and then go ahead back to you.
Okay. So let's see. Evan, are you ready to start? Let's go in the same order that we did the 3 panelists speaking. So let's start with Kevin.
Oh, closing rounds. Wow, thank you. I'd have. It's been a real privilege to come and be here and talk to a whole group of people, but I'd have happily put this time aside just to talk to Evan and Richard. Fantastic to be part of this and to learn some backstories, and being able to stand here and look backwards and then look forwards with that, with the benefit of that, with your hindsight, is absolutely fabulous. Very grateful for that, and I look forward to chatting to both of you as we move forward. I've got your emails. Thank you very much. Real pleasure. And thanks, Sheila. Terrific facilitation, pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And Evan.
Ditto. The only question I have for Kevin yet is, when are you going to bring Earth Funerals to the U.S.?
And Richard.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's I really actually remembered a lot and learned a lot tonight. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Nice job. Thanks.
So what I'd like to do for closing is for everybody to write, and everybody who would like to write in the chat what surprised you from this session, just like 1 or 2 sentences, or the other question. You have a choice of question. What excited you from this session? So either what surprised you or what excited you. And be sure to post it in the chat so that everybody can post it to everybody. Excited for ideas about organic implementation from Steve. And Jote says it was exciting to hear stories of how large some of the organizations were and the level of detail that the SCM could attend to. Griff says small or large, all business can use sociocracy. Vernon says, I expected better decisions and better implementation, but I was surprised to hear about faster decisions. Lloyd writes about culture change.
And specifically, it was meaningful to hear how culture did change with the adoption. As he says, culture change can be so difficult.
Yep.
Also, in amongst the comments is a response to Kevin about that earlier question of his structure and role.
Ah, okay.
There's a registered charity in Australia, 5 separate legal entities, 2 boards, and he's the founder and acting CEO and board member. For the person that asked that, I forget who it was, but didn't want to lose that.
Good. So before we close, I just want to point out to people who all the members of the Sociocracy Consulting Group are, because we're all here, because we all wanted to hear this. So if everybody in the Sociocracy Consulting Group would wave. So it's Francine in Canada, John and me in the United States, and Aaron and Gina in Australia. John, anything else you want to say before we close?
No, just thank you to our panelists, and thank you to everyone for showing up and hearing what they have to say and giving us your feedback. Great to do this. Worked out really nicely.
Yes, thank you
Thanks for having
everybody.
us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you everybody for your participation. And somebody wrote,
Kevin says, fascinated to hear the reports from Evan and Richard of internal trust building and staff retention.
yeah. And then Gina wrote, hearing things I like to say come out of the mouths of those who have been doing it on the ground. The personal stories show a powerful pathway to transforming how we do things together.
Mm-hmm. And from Vonda, stories of engagement of workforce people and their process, facilitation, and change. Okay, well, I think we're complete, Sheila.
Yes, we are. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of whatever time of day it is or evening.
Thank you.
And we'll let you know when the recording is available.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Night.
You can stop the recording now.
Yep.